In the dim glow of a flickering neon sign that read, Joe's Diner, on a rain-slicked street in a forgotten corner of the city, a small boy named Timmy huddled against the cold brick wall, his thin jacket doing little to shield him from the relentless downpour that mirrored the tears streaming down his dirt-streaked face. Just moments earlier, the diner's manager, a burly man with a perpetual scowl etched into his features like a scar from years of bitterness, had grabbed Timmy by the collar and hurled him out the door with a force that belied the child's frail frame, shouting words that cut deeper than any physical blow, words that branded him as worthless, a beggar not fit for even the scraps from the kitchen floor. Timmy's stomach growled in protest, a hollow ache that had become his constant companion since his mother fell ill and the family's meager savings evaporated like morning mist, leaving him to scavenge for survival in a world that seemed designed to crush the vulnerable underfoot. If you believe in the power of kindness and the beauty of second chances, hit that like button right now, drop a comment sharing your thoughts, share this video with someone who needs a reminder of humanity's warmth, and subscribe to Gentle Hearts for more stories that touch the soul and inspire change. Let's spread that light together. Timmy's life had not always been this shadowed tapestry of hardship. Once, in the sunlit days before his father's untimely departure in a factory accident that left behind only echoes of laughter and unpaid bills, their home was a modest haven filled with the aroma of homemade stews and the soft hum of his mother's lullabies, where a boy's biggest worry was whether he'd catch the school bus on time. But fate, that cruel architect, had redesigned their world overnight. His mother, once vibrant and strong, now lay bedridden in their cramped apartment, her body ravaged by an illness that devoured their resources faster than they could gather them, forcing Timmy, at just 10 years old, to navigate the harsh streets alone in search of food, odd jobs, or the occasional handout from strangers whose pity flickered briefly before fading into indifference. That fateful evening, driven by a desperation that gnawed at his insides like a living thing, Timmy had mustered the courage to step into Joe's Diner, his wide eyes scanning the bustling room where patrons laughed over steaming plates of burgers and fries, the scents wrapping around him like a taunting embrace he could never quite reach. He approached the counter timidly, his voice barely a whisper as he asked if there might be any leftover scraps, perhaps a half-eaten sandwich from a table that had been cleared, anything to quiet the storm in his belly and bring a morsel back to his ailing mother, whose frail smiles were the only light piercing his darkening days. The manager, Mr. Harlan, a man whose heart had long since calcified under the weight of his own unfulfilled dreams and the daily grind of managing a failing establishment, saw not a child in need but an intruder, a pest that threatened the fragile veneer of respectability he clung to like a lifeline. With eyes narrowed to slits and veins bulging in his neck, he loomed over Timmy, his voice booming through the diner like thunder, drawing stares from the scattered customers who shifted uncomfortably in their booths but did nothing to intervene. Harlan's words were venomous barbs, accusing the boy of laziness, of being a drain on society, of sullying the place with his presence, each syllable landing like a punch to Timmy's fragile spirit, shattering the last remnants of hope he had carried through the door. Before Timmy could even stammer a plea, Harlan's rough hands clamped down, dragging him across the checkered floor amid the clatter of dropped utensils and muffled gasps, until they reached the exit where, with a final shove, he propelled the boy into the rain-soaked night, the door slamming shut behind him like the closing of a coffin lid. Timmy crumpled to the pavement, his knees scraping against the wet asphalt, sobs racking his small body as the cold seeped into his bones, mingling with the profound loneliness that threatened to swallow him whole, wondering if this was the moment when the world would finally break him beyond repair. As the minutes ticked by in agonizing slowness, Timmy pressed his back against the wall, his mind replaying the humiliation in vivid, tortuous detail, the way the other diners had averted their eyes, the sting of rejection that burned hotter than any hunger pang, the crushing realization that in a city teeming with people, he was utterly invisible, a ghost haunting the edges of their comfortable lives. He thought of his mother, waiting in the dim light of their apartment, her coughs echoing like distant thunder, and how he would return empty-handed once more, his failure a heavier burden than any physical weight. The rain pounded relentlessly, blurring the neon lights into smeared halos, and Timmy's shivers grew more violent, his thin frame trembling not just from the chill but from the despair that clawed at his chest, whispering lies that he was unworthy of even the smallest act of compassion. In that moment of utter desolation, the roar of engines pierced the night, growing louder like an approaching storm, and Timmy lifted his head to see a group of bikers pulling up to the curb, their leather jackets glistening under the street lamps, chrome gleaming on their massive motorcycles that rumbled with a power that seemed to shake the very ground beneath him. The bikers, a rugged crew known in the neighborhood as the Iron Wolves, dismounted with the kind of effortless swagger that commanded respect and a touch of fear from passers-by, their beards unkempt, tattoos snaking across muscled arms, scars telling stories of roads traveled and battles fought, yet beneath the intimidating exterior lay hearts forged in the fires of their own past struggles, men who had once been boys like Timmy, cast aside by an indifferent world and rebuilt through bonds of brotherhood and unspoken codes of honor. Led by Jax, a towering figure with a mane of silver-streaked hair and eyes that held the wisdom of someone who had stared down his own demons, the group strode toward the diner's entrance, their boots thudding against the pavement like drumbeats heralding change. They pushed through the door, the bell jingling ominously, and claimed a large cornered table without a word, their presence filling the room like a sudden gust of wind, causing the other patrons to glance nervously and Harlan to straighten up behind the counter, his scowl deepening as he sized them up, assuming they were troublemakers who would scare away his dwindling clientele. But as they settled in, ordering coffee and plates of food with gruff efficiency, Jax's sharp gaze drifted to the window, catching sight of the small figure huddled outside, rain-drenched and forlorn, a sight that stirred something deep within him, a memory of his own childhood nights spent in similar misery, scavenging for survival after his family fractured under the strain of poverty and loss. What unfolded next was a slow unraveling of assumptions and a weaving of unexpected alliances, as Jax rose from his seat, his heavy boots echoing across the floor, and stepped outside into the rain, approaching Timmy with a gentleness that belied his formidable appearance, kneeling down to the boy's level so their eyes met on equal ground, his voice a low rumble that carried no threat but only quiet. Empathy. Timmy flinched at first, fear gripping him like icy fingers, but there was something in Jax's eyes, a flicker of understanding, a shared recognition of pain, that coaxed him to stay, to listen as the biker asked about his story, drawing out the tale of hardship in halting whispers that grew steadier with each word. Back inside, the other bikers watched through the glass, their conversations halting as they pieced together the scene, their own histories of rejection and redemption bubbling to the surface, reminding them why they rode together, not just for the thrill of the open road, but to protect the vulnerable, to be the shield they themselves had once desperately needed. Harlan, sensing the shift in the air, hovered near the door, his earlier bravado crumbling under the weight of the bikers' collective stare, a dawning realization creeping in that his actions had consequences beyond the immediate satisfaction of his ego. As Jax led Timmy back inside, the boy's hand tentatively clasped in his large, calloused one, the diner fell into a hushed anticipation, the rain outside now a soft patter against the windows like nature's own applause for the turning tide. Harlan moved to protest, his face reddening with indignation, but the bikers rose as one, their presence a wall of solidarity that brooked no argument, their eyes conveying a silent message that kindness was not optional here, that the true measure of strength lay not in domination but in uplifting the fallen. In that charged moment, Timmy was seated at their table, a plate of warm food placed before him, the steam rising like hope reborn, and as he took his first bite, the flavors exploding on his tongue after days of emptiness, tears welled anew, not from sorrow, but from the overwhelming rush of being seen, of mattering in a world that had so often turned away. The bikers shared stories around the table, their voices weaving a tapestry of resilience, of how they had each faced their own rude managers in life's diner, metaphorical gatekeepers who had thrown them out into the cold, and how they had risen, not through vengeance, but through forging connections that mended the breaks within. Harlan, cornered by his own reflection in their unyielding gaze, found himself compelled to confront the ugliness he had unleashed, a seed of remorse taking root as he watched the boy's transformation, the light returning to eyes that had been dulled by neglect. The evening stretched into a profound communion, the diner's ordinary hum transforming into something sacred, where strangers became allies, and a simple act of defiance against cruelty sparked a chain reaction of goodwill. Other patrons, inspired by the scene, began to contribute, slipping bills into Timmy's pocket or offering words of encouragement that built upon the bikers' foundation, turning one boy's despair into a communal triumph. Jax, in particular, felt a paternal pull toward Timmy, reminiscing about his own lost son who had been taken too soon by illness, and vowed silently to extend his protection beyond this night, perhaps arranging for medical help for the boy's mother or providing the stability that had eluded them. As the rain eased and the stars peeked through the parting clouds, symbolizing the clearing of emotional storms, Timmy's heart swelled with a newfound belief in humanity's capacity for redemption, the rude ejection now a distant memory overshadowed by the warmth enveloping him, a reminder that even in the darkest alleys, light could burst forth from the most unlikely sources. In the days that followed, the ripple effects of that night spread like wildfire through the community. The bikers returned regularly, not as intimidators but as guardians, ensuring no one else faced Harlan's wrath unchecked, and the manager himself, haunted by the mirror the incident held up to his soul, began a tentative journey toward change, offering free meals to those in need and softening his edges with each small act of atonement. Timmy's mother received the care she desperately required, funded by donations sparked by the Bikers Network, her health improving in tandem with the boys' renewed spirit, their home once again echoing with laughter rather than coughs. The story of the rude manager, the hungry kid, and the bikers who took a table became legend in the neighborhood, a beacon for those teetering on the edge of hopelessness, proving that kindness, when wielded with conviction, could dismantle barriers and heal wounds thought irreparable, leaving behind a legacy of inspiration that touched lives far beyond that rainy night. If this story has touched your heart, stirred emotions you didn't expect, or reminded you of the profound impact one act of kindness can have, please like this video, comment below with your thoughts on how kindness has changed your life, share it with friends who need this message, and subscribe to Gentle Hearts for more tales that celebrate the human spirit. Your engagement keeps these stories alive and spreading. And before we end, here's a special request. Comment the line, "Kindness always wins," below if you felt moved by Timmy's journey and the bikers' compassion. Let's fill the comments with that powerful affirmation.